Hello, David Crenshaw here, physical therapist, yoga teacher. For about 14 years, I owned a physical therapy clinic and a yoga studio. During that time, I got to work with both people in the capacity as the physical therapist and also watching them move and practice and try to learn yoga. I wanted to present in this course what I believe are the most fundamental things to learn in a yoga practice to help prevent problems and injuries from occurring and to help people really get the fundamentals down so that their yoga practice is beneficial, very healthy for them. So let's begin. In Joint-Wise Yoga, we'll learn 7 healthy alignment and movement principles. We'll learn 12 yoga postures and 5 breathing practices. In session 1, we're going to learn breathing that promotes healthy alignment versus breathing that's not so good for our alignment, right? If we're breathing up into our chest, it's going to alter our alignment. Sitting and standing, they are the foundation to most of our movement in our life. So where we are starting from, what position we're in when we sit and when we stand has a profound effect on how we move. And then moving in the 3 planes of motion, right? We're always moving in these 3 dimensions. So how do we move well in the 3 planes of motion? And then finally, we'll talk about the home practice for session 1. The type of breathing I'd like you to learn first is called lateral breathing or thoracidiaphragmatic breathing. How's that for a mouthful? This type of breathing pattern is going to have the least effect on the posture, the most neutral. But what we want to think about is the lower ribs initiating the breathing pattern, moving out to the sides. So here I'll demonstrate for you what that looks like, breathing out to the sides. What you don't want to do is to breathe into the chest or into the belly, as that may alter the posture. Of course, I'm exaggerating here. So go ahead and practice, as you see in the first picture there, breathing up into the chest and just see how there might be a tendency to overarch the back and maybe strain into the neck or the shoulders. And then breathe into the belly and see that, yeah, there may be a little tendency to overwork somewhere, in the back as well. And then try breathing to the sides and see that that does not cause those alterations in the body's alignment. So let's have a look at the respiratory diaphragm. Is going to be attached to the lungs here. And so when the muscle contracts, it's going to pull down. So since it's attached all along the bottom of the rib cage and the front of the lumbar spine, the lower back spine, when that muscle contracts, it's going to be able to pull the lungs down and then it sucks in the air. And then of course when it goes back up to its resting position, it's going to push the air back out. And the intercostal muscles are the muscles in between the rib cage, and they can also help with respiration. In this diagram, you can see respiratory diaphragm in its resting position versus when it is contracted down and, of course, pulled the lung tissue down to pull in the air. And then when it's resting and it's going back up, it's going to expel the air. And we can also notice that down here at the bottom of the rib cage, see that on the exhalation, the location of the bottom of the rib cage versus breathing in, how the ribs have gone out to the sides. Next, consider how sitting and standing really are main foundation for movement. So the way we sit and the way we stand is going to have a profound effect on how we move and the quality of our movement patterns. So notice that the spine is in a very similar position when we sit and when we stand. It's also good that when we sit that we get some good lumbar support, by the way. When we're standing with a good neutral alignment of the spine, we're going to be able to move well in the 3 planes of motion, which would be flexion or forward bending and extending, rotation, and then also side bending to either side. But notice that when the spine changes its shape, now it's not going to have the same mobility available to it. Then it's going to alter these movement patterns. These patterns are going to be shorter, but to move the same distance that we might be used to, we're going to have to strain certain areas of the body and maybe move too much in those flexible areas. Too much in the back or the neck or the shoulder or the knee or the hip. To take care of the body, we need to align the spine, be more neutral more often. Of course, when we're seated in the office or at home, we want to be in as neutral position as we can be. And of course, some good support for the lower back can be quite helpful. Of course, if we're in this rounded position for lengths of time, after a while, the body's going to adapt to that position. The hips are going to get shorter. The chest is going to get tighter. The head's going to start to adjust forward. So we do not want to be sitting like that very often, right? So in our yoga practice too, we want to practice really healthy alignment. So the base of our healthy alignment when we're sitting is going to be on the 2 sitting bones. So it's really important to try to feel where these bones are at, where we're sitting. Those bones are down in the lower part here. And so we want to sit equally on those 2 sitting bones. So let's talk about healthy alignment. We'll begin in a seated position. So you can see this gentleman looks pretty good, doesn't he? He's sitting, and when we think about where the line of gravity is going to be going through his body, right? So the line of gravity is just coming through, and it looks really nice and straight from that angle. And then from the side, if we think about that line of gravity, we want it to go pretty much through the crown of the head, through the earlobe, through the shoulder and the hip. In order to find this alignment, what he generally needs to be thinking about here is to come up and forward through the crown of the head, a little bit forward, and then to tuck the chin. So in this video, I'm going to demonstrate for you how to go from a slumped position to extending slightly forward and then tucking the chin backwards. So there's the slump. We're going this way and then tucking backwards. So flex up and forward and then tuck backwards. So here it is with the spine model. There's the flexed or slump position. So you can see it going up and forward and then tucking backwards. The spine is not like a slinky. The spine is not like that, right? We can't just go straight up. So notice the shape of the spine as we get a little slumpy. There's a definite curve, and the joints of this part of our spine are oriented in this direction. So they're going to be able to extend forward and up as they get straighter, right? And then tucking the head back. That's what works for a human being. So that's showing you the thoracic part of it, or the ribbed part of the spine, how it moves. So let's go ahead and practice this 2-step process of extending the spine. So let yourself be a little slumped and then extend slightly forward and up. And then step 2, tuck the chin. You don't have to go as extreme as what I did in this example, but that 2-step process. Lengthen up slightly forward and then tuck your chin. And make sure you're not lifting the chest when you do this. So you want to keep the chest down. And then notice as you're lengthening up and tucking back, you might feel this part of your abdominals working a little harder, and that's what you want to feel while you're practicing. The difference between a seated and standing position, of course, is where we are weight bearing. We're going to do pretty much the same things in sitting and standing, with up and slightly forward. But where we are weight bearing is the big difference, right? So we want to be nice and equal on the sitting bones when we're sitting, but then nice and equal on our feet when we are standing. So let's talk more about standing alignment now. The typical problem people have in standing and in standing pose in yoga is the tendency to put too much weight on the heels. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But in general, we want to put about 60% of our weight into our heels and about 40% into the balls of the feet. Let's talk about ideal standing alignment. So we can see in the green box here, the ideal alignment where the line of gravity is going down through the head, through about where the earlobe is, through the shoulder, the hip, and then the ankle. So what happens when our alignment is not the ideal, you can see that the head tends to be forward in all three of these examples. And then to compensate, what has been found is that people tend to put too much weight into the heels. So as the weight is going forward up here, forward of the line of gravity, then there tends to be a compensation where we end up putting too much weight in the heels. So the same alignment that we're talking about, you can see how it would apply to helping lengthen out that spine to help it get closer to the ideal alignment. So imagine lifting upwards and then pulling slightly back and then pressing a bit more into the balls of the feet. So in addition to thinking about putting a little bit more weight into the balls of the feet, we want to think about the four corners of the feet. What might that mean? You might have heard this in a yoga class, or perhaps you'll hear it in the future, but what it means is the base of the big toe. There's the base of the big toe here, the base of the little toe, and the inside and the outside of the heel. So while we're thinking about the 60-40, a little bit more weight typically needs to go into, the base of the big toe and the base of the little toe. To help balance out the feet. And of course, we want to do that same thing on both of the feet. So it really helps to balance out the ankle and foot position, which is going to have an important effect all the way up the chain. So the way our feet balance is going to really help the rest of our alignment and our posture. So let's look at this concept of lengthening forward and upward while standing, and then reaching the arms as well. So there's lateral breathing, by the way, and then lengthening up and slightly forward. So you can see how doing that is really going to help that spine lengthen up and forward. And so reaching the arms in that little bit of forward direction as well is going to help the body in that endeavor. So if you think of reaching your arms straight up, there might be a tendency to start to then round the back towards its faulty posture that we're trying to get away from. Let's do an experiment. So here I am squished against the door. I'm reaching kind of straight up. It looks like a little bit forward, but let's see how far I get. So I got to 28 inches from where that ruler started. And in this next video, you can see I'm a little bit farther away from the door there, and I'm going to be able to let my body lengthen forward and up. So then I was able to measure how far up I went. Hey, look, 2 more inches. So let's go ahead and practice standing, feeling maybe a little bit more pressure pushing into the balls of the feet, lengthening up and slightly forward with allowing your arms to also lengthen up and slightly forward, and just see if you don't feel like you can reach a little higher. You might also want to do that experiment that I did against the door, so let me know if you do. Then also just take note that the core muscles will automatically be working when you try this method. Give it a try. So let's put some more thought into why it may be that using these core muscles is helpful for lengthening us up and slightly forward. Because of the curvature of the spine, if we think about lifting straight up this way, it's going to be really tempting to do a little back bend and then to start to arch the back, because the rib cage will start to lift up a little bit as we go this direction. It's going to tell these abdominal muscles to shut off. Here we can see the transversus abdominis. It's considered a core muscle. The other abdominal muscles are considered core muscles. The pelvic floor, this is a little back muscle called the multifidus or multifidi, and some other muscles are considered core muscles, or there's some debate about which ones are core muscles, but in general, all the muscles in here are core muscles. So you can see that if we are lifting that rib cage and moving things even a little bit this way, it's going to tell these muscles to let go, to shut off, and that's not what we want. But if we think about going this way, it's like squeezing a balloon with these core muscles, and that's going to help lengthen that spine up, and that's going to be quite helpful in our posture. Hi everybody, Dave Crenshaw, physical therapist. How do you make exercise simple while you're staying at home and social distancing? That's the theme of our video today. The way to make it easy is you think about the 3 planes of motion. And the 3 planes are, right, the forward and backwards direction, the side to side direction, and rotation. Right? And all other movements are a combination of those 3. So if you're doing those 3 in your joints, you can do a lot to take care of your body. So let's do some examples. So let's start with the head and the neck, right? So if you first tip your chin down and then tip your head forward, and then with your chin staying down and in, then look up last. Tip your chin down, tuck forward, keep your chin in, and look up last. And then let's go side to side. So if you tip your head to the side, keep that shoulder down. And then the other side. Good. And then what's the third one? Rotation, right? So if you turn your head, let those muscles stretch out. Go the other direction. Good. And you can do the same thing with the whole torso, right? So you can tuck first, stretch out your back, glide backwards, look up last, tuck your chin down, come forward. Hope I don't have a bald spot. And then come back, yeah, look up last. And then side to side, you can tip your body to the side, stack up, tip your body to the other side, stack up. And then of course third one, rotation. So if you turn your belly, turn your shoulders, then your head, turn your belly, then your shoulders, and then your head. And let's do one more body part, as an example, right? So we got the shoulder blades, so we can go forward and back. And going back, we need that to help counter texting and typing and such. Good, and we can shrug up. Nice, and then of course some big circles. That feels good. All right, so I hope that gives you an example of how you can think about exercise in this way to make it easier, right? And you can stretch your shoulders that way, right? You can do your hips, you can do your wrists and ankles, and some other different places in your body in a similar way. So I hope that helps you think about exercise in a way that makes it a little more simple. So let's go ahead and finish with a brief review. We want to practice lateral breathing because that's the most neutral way to breathe, and it's going to have the least effect on our posture and really help us with our alignment. And then when we exhale, you notice that downward arrow, right? So when we exhale, we really want to let go and allow the rib cage to go down when we exhale. Then, of course, when we sit, we want to sit nice and equal on the sitting bones. And then we want to move better, to feel better by moving well in the 3 planes of motion, right? With our forward bends and back bends and twists and side bends, both in sitting and standing, but from that good neutral position on our sitting bones when we're sitting, and on our feet well and nice and equal when we're standing. 60-40 in the feet, right? Which is the 60, which is the 40? Right, it's the heels, it's the 60, and the balls of the feet, 40. It's the tendency to be a little too much in the heels, so think about pressing into the balls of the feet a little bit, and see if you don't feel like you can lengthen your body a little easier by doing that. Thinking about the good foundation and how to lengthen up by going a little forward and then tucking the chin. Same way in standing. Next is our practice video. So enjoy your practice, and I'll see you next time.